Thank you, Bill, joining us.
Nice to be here. It goes back to what I said. It's all about creating experience. Right. We use the term placemaking, but more important, placekeeping. It's not about what it looks like, but it's like, how do you experience it?
Can you say in Korean, 구독과 좋아요 부탁해요?
No.
안녕하세요. 이원재의 건축 레시피 이원재입니다. 오늘은 뉴욕 맨하탄에 위치한 샵 건축 오피스에 방문했습니다. 창립자이자 파트너이신 빌님과 인터뷰를 나눠보도록 하겠습니다. Thank you, Bill, joining us.
Nice to be here.
Bill William is one of the founding partner of SHoP Architecture Company office, and then you found this whole awesome office with 3 different people named after this shop.
The original acronym of SHoP was Sharpless, Hole, and Pasquarelli. But 10 years after the founding, we decided it was more important to kind of reflect it as a community of designers. And, you know, we were very hands-on in terms of the way we approached our process, especially physically. And half the office was a quote-unquote was a shop, a workshop. So we kind of, homed in on the idea of, rather than the acronym of our last names, we just made it short and said SHoP. I think what makes the office somewhat unique about the founders is we all came into architecture as our second careers. I mean, I studied structural engineering, construction management at Penn State. I then worked in construction from mid-'80s to early '90s. My partner Greg was on Wall Street as an investment banker. My brother was in political science, fine arts. He went directly into architecture right after undergrad and then moved to Japan for 3 years and practiced architecture there. My future partner and wife, Corey Sharpless, was in marketing and finance. So when we all came together, we brought a different perspective, not only our thoughts about design, but also our thoughts about business. And I think we've always been clear, it's critical if you're ever going to form a partnership, you don't want to form a partnership with people who think necessarily exactly the same way. You want that difference. So
let's talk about now project. Do you have any significant project that you kind of like remember during the economic recession or Corona?
When I think about the most challenging period for this office, I would say COVID. I think what COVID set apart from that was that there were things that we had never seen before. There was still prosperity to a degree when COVID started, and we were incredibly busy, but suddenly everyone had to go isolated. And then I'm talking about communication is key. Being in the room with your client, being in the room with your designers, it's all about body language. It's about reading everything. And suddenly everyone is on Zoom or Teams, and some people don't even turn their cameras on. And suddenly you're flying blind. And so we all had to kind of reinvent ourselves in terms of how we approach, communicating with our clients, communicating with our staff and consultants, but also in terms of where we were working. I talk about collaboration. For us, it's all about being together. It's about working with our hands, drawing and having those conversations. And suddenly we couldn't do that for more than 2 years. A lot of our staff moved away from New York. They moved home, moved to their home countries, moved to the states in the union, and some of which haven't come back. They're permanently remote. But I would say one of the most positive things that came out of it was the staff were now all over the world. We have New Zealand, Australia, Seoul, Beijing, Milan, South Africa, Mexico, Paris, all over the world, as well as the states in the union. And even though, the time zones can be challenging, even though we're not in the same space, we're able to communicate to our clients even more directly. And it's had a positive impact. And so we adopted a more international work during this period. Prior to that, we were working internationally, but now, a little over a quarter of our business is now international. And it's been positive because we have staff around the world. We're doing work again in Chengdu in China. We're in India. But I would say that prior to COVID, that wasn't totally the case. So in some degree, there's definitely things I miss personally. I miss having a lot of the staff that are now permanently remote, not with us. But the opportunities it created have been pretty remarkable. I would say that of all the moments in the history of this office, from 9/11 to the greatest recession to COVID, COVID was the one that really created the biggest influence.
So I loved actually PS1 project when I back in the undergrad, and I loved the Paju library project you did in Korea. And what I like about is, I mean, I didn't know at the time your background is engineering and like marketing stuff, but when I see that, still when I look at as an architecture student, when I look at the project, it's done by a young architect, very aggressive, energetic young architect group. But I see the language is evolving through all like later on all the way to the Barclays and American Copper building, and then it was very interesting for me because like I thought like those kind of language might be very difficult to have as like a big office or like well-known office. Maybe Frank Gehry or Daniel Libeskind, that already start to recognized by the world. That might be easy, but as like a small ateliers or young architect, it's going to be difficult to have the same language. But I look at that project look at the materiality, use the same materiality and actually see the process evolve it at the end. So can you tell us a little bit about, because like how do you about the PS1 and you evolve to the Paju library, and then
Sure.
Now you have a American Copper Union, and then you have a Barclay project.
Sure. I mean, all those projects you mentioned, and even up today, are always linked through a process. And with PS1, and we're talking about this is 2000, we're a young office still. PS1 today, you get like more than a month to design. We had, as I recall, we had 3 or 4 days. It was a very early days. Alana Heiss was the director of PS1 MoMA, and they wanted to come up with a theme. That year, the theme was, bringing the beach, urban beach, creating an urban beach. And so the concept that we kind of generated from was this idea of how can we think about the programs that occur, on the in the seashore. How can we bring the idea of structure and materiality and that program into creating a holistic form? So everything had to kind of come together and create what we call this piece of architecture called Dunescape. So Dunescape. So the idea of the dunes and, the landscape coming together. And so we talked about, whether it was swimming, the idea of the cabana, coverage, getting wet, taking all these programs that would occur on, at the seashore. So we had to figure out, well, what's the material we're going to use? Well, we ended up using 2x2 cedar members, in which we could then construct into these truss form structures that then we could laminate together. But what was really interesting, the 2 individuals, and these were new hires, one was Rich Garber and the other one was Young Moo. Young Moo was a Korean who studied at City College, and Rich Garber came from Columbia. Totally different backgrounds. Came together and they both used a software called Maya. At this point, Rhino didn't exist yet for us. We had Vectorworks and all this stuff, but these 2 came into our office, and using the Maya software, we're able to take this idea of program and form and structure and rationalize this thing in 3D dimensional space. And from there, beginning to understand how could we break this down into components where they were structurally static. At the same time, we could start to think about how they would go together. And so taking the form, being able to break it into these 2-dimensional planes in which then we could construct as these trusses, we were able to generate, these 2 individuals were able to generate basically the fabrication tickets. We were able to construct this project in 1 month. We won the competition, and if it wasn't for us embracing this new software technology, having the talent who were just in the office, us being able to understand how we can rationalize the budget, it would never come together. And it's still considered one of the most successful projects. And the key is that over the last 20 some years, we are constantly evolving our process. We are always looking for how technologies are going to influence. Look, we can even talk about AI, but AI for us is not about creating form. For us, AI is something that, could enhance the process of figuring out how to problem solve. It's almost, I'm blessed that, we came from an analog period, pen and ink, to see these stages all the way up to where we are today. It really grounds us in terms of understanding how we approach design, but it also grounds us in terms of how we communicate with our clients.
So maybe next question, I think I have two more questions go. So what do you think about the modern architecture?
It goes back to what I said, it's all about creating experience. Right. We use the term placemaking, but more important, placekeeping. How do you create something that people will, interpret in their own way and not something you are trying to prescribe or force? And I think, my brother always uses the term, it's all about creating this experience of joy. You can look at Barclays, you can look at PS1, MoMA, but you can look at, 111 West 57th Street in your Central Park looking up. It's kind of this civic gesture to the public. You might not live there, but at the end of the day, it becomes something that's embedded in your memory, in your skyline. They all have that kind of common DNA. I like to believe when you look at one of our buildings, it's not about what it looks like, but it's like, how do you experience it?
I love the fact that you mentioned that you not create space, also keep the space. That's a very nice slogan. That
placekeeping.
Placekeeping, right? Placekeeping. So I think the final question, in this in Korea, we're like all about the K-pops and K-dramas. I don't know whether you're familiar with that term, but in architecture industry, we're just concerning about why don't we have a K-architecture in Korea? And when you look into the Korean industry of architecture, like what kind of thing that we're missing out, or do you have any motto or a slogan that we should keep ourselves as an architect in Korea?
Well, it's not just, I would be honest, it's not just Korea, it's here, it's everywhere. And in some cases, hopefully it doesn't repeat, but we repeat it because we're not, human beings in current society are lazy when it comes to understanding history and how history in some degree could impact in a positive way in terms of how we address the problems we have today. I don't want to get into the politics of this country, but a lot of it is just education. A lot of it is just people don't read. They don't read their history. And so I feel that social media has shortchanged, the current generation. And I don't know any solutions. All we can do here is that at SHoP, we try and promote this idea of knowledge transfer, our own personal experiences. What do we want to experience out of life? How does it influence the way we design, the projects we create? And ultimately, how do we learn from others and how do we learn to listen? That's a problem across the globe right now, is no one's listening to each other. It's all on this device. So I think, I would hope there's other firms like us, but it's not just architecture, it's in every facet of business. So it's not just Korea, it's everywhere. So but I do believe our culture, the way we approach our work, the way we communicate, the way we execute is very much embedded in terms of us understanding where we've come from the last 6 decades. And ultimately, how can we learn from the past, but bringing it into a contemporary way? And we're in a building, it was built in 1913. It's the first skyscraper in New York City. And look at the lobby downstairs. It's one of the most beautiful lobbies in New York City. And we said, it's not about copying the past. It's about taking those elements of the past that make us joyful, happy, excited, and using technology in a way that allows us to evolve them in a contemporary way. And in order to do that, you have to understand history, you have to be able to look back, you have to understand how things were made back then and how can you start to think about how they could be made today.
지금까지 이원재의 건축 레시피 이원재였습니다. 오늘은 샵 아키텍트의 파트너이신 빌과 샵의 역사와 건축에 대해서 이야기해봤는데요. 구독과 좋아요 한번 눌러주시기 부탁드리겠습니다. Can you say in Korean? 구독과 좋아요 부탁해요.
No.
Okay. Okay, just say 사랑해요.
Sanel,
사랑해요.
I can't tell.
All right.
I love you.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for.
Thank you very much.